Greetings. Ooh. Greetings, everyone. It's electric in here tonight. It's so exciting. Welcome, welcome to everyone to what promises to be a fantastic HDS event here in New York. We're so excited. My name is Julia Witkiewicz-Devoy, MTS 94, and I am incredibly honored to be the chairperson of the Alumni Council this year for the 2013-2014 academic year. I've been a member of council for a number of years now, and I have just tremendously enjoyed my time as chairperson this year. I serve with exceptional people. A lot of members of council are here, and I thank them for being here. I would like to, if council members could stand and be recognized for a moment. Thank you, council members. And thank you for everything that you do for HDS and our school community. We're, again, ultra thrilled to be here in New York City, outside of New England. We're in the New York metropolitan area with so many HDS alumni friends here. Actually, I think this is the biggest concentration of HDS alums in the country. There are more than 600 of us here in New York City. So it's a sizable portion of our alumni community, community of about 6,000 people. So. We started a tradition last year, and I think Michael and I were kind of trying to decide if something is in its second year, if it's actually a tradition. But it's been running for 2 years, and our practice is to bring distinguished alumni speakers to an event that we titled Divinity Dialogues. And each year, we take Divinity Dialogues on the road once. And last year, we took Divinity Dialogues to DC, and it was fantastic. And tonight we find ourselves here. So who knows where we'll be next? And I keep hinting San Francisco, San Francisco, San Francisco. But we'll see what happens. So thank you to everyone for attending the event tonight. And before I go any further, a really special thanks to Bjorn Sorensen, MTS 02. He's an associate here at Skadden, and he is the one who really enabled us to be in this amazing space tonight. So I wanted to ask Bjorn to stand and be recognized. Thank you so much for your assistance in making this happen for us tonight. And one other question is, can we come back and have another party here? So we as a council, as the Alumni Council, we started Divinity Dialogues with our Distinguished Speaker Series last year as a way to do something sacred for us HDS graduates. And that is to come together in community and to share our stories, to share our voices. And I'm sure that you all know that HDS alums and HDS students have the most fascinating stories. I mean, even just walking around the room tonight, I heard a couple of people's journeys and their paths, and they're all amazing. It's not like a point A to point B. There's all of this really wonderful, fascinating meanders to the road. But we all do come, we come to HDS, and we have these visions. We have fascinating stories, and we have a calling. We have a vocation, we have a challenge, we have a restlessness to make the world a different place, a better place. And I think we all share that thread. And that's why I chose 3 words. I was kind of thinking at the beginning, before becoming chairperson, I was going to write a mission statement and a paragraph, and then I just boiled it down to 3 words that really were powerful. And that was values, vision, and action. And I think that sums up, as diverse as we are and as diverse as the paths are that we take, we all have these values. That's what brought us there. We have vision, and we put it into action. We are not a lot that just sits around and thinks about thinking. We actually get out there and do something. Although thinking about thinking is cool too. So I chose those words, and I believe they really do summarize the uniqueness of our experience as an HDS community. And it's certainly true of our speaker tonight. And I'm really glad to tell you a little bit about her now. Cornelia Cannon Holden, MDiv 03. She's the CEO and founder of the Mindful Warrior. It's an innovative company in the field of team building, performance enhancement, and leadership development. Cornelia is currently the director of Core Leadership Portal at the Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut. She graduated summa cum laude from Bowdoin College, where she was the NCAA Division II Giant Slalom ski racing champion and a member of the varsity tennis and varsity crew team. In addition to her work in sports psychology as a consultant for the United States women's ice hockey team from 2006 to 2010 for the Winter Olympics, Cornelia's institutional clients have included Georgetown, Middlebury, Yale, and the Navajo Nation. Still an avid skier and outdoorswoman, Cornelia lives now at the Hotchkiss School with her husband, Kevin Hicks, who's the head of the school, and their daughter, Zulika Alice. Cornelia, we are so honored to invite you to take the podium now. Welcome.
Thank you, Julia. It's an extraordinary honor to be here this evening with all of you, and I thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to spend some time not only with me, but with what I think is one of the more remarkable communities in the country, and that's Harvard Divinity School. Before we begin, I too want to thank the members of the Harvard Divinity School Alumni Council for your extraordinary work on behalf of the school. I want to thank Chairman and Vice Chairman Julia Witkovich-Devoy and Sarah Taylor Peck for your work with the Alumni Council. Michael Goetz and Nancy, did I pronounce that, Michael, right? I didn't ask you. Okay, great. Michael, thank you for your work. And Nancy Byrne, a particular shout out to you for your wonderful behind the scenes work to make tonight possible. Bjorn, also thank you for allowing us to be in the heart of New York City and here in Times Square. Hannah Peters and Courtney Leach, also for your work for Harvard Divinity School. I also want to thank a woman who came here tonight from Atlanta, and she was somebody that I met at Harvard Divinity School in the fall of my first year. And I remember turning to her and just saying, you know what? You're a member of my tribe. Can we be friends? So she has flown here, as I said, from Atlanta, took care of me all day today, prepared me for today's speech, and I just would like you to rise and let us honor you. So thank you so much for being such a tremendous friend in my life. I've been invited tonight to share something about how my values, vision, and experience while I was at Harvard Divinity School inform my work and service in the world today. And as Julia already mentioned, Harvard Divinity School is a place where stories matter. As Sue Monk Kidd has been known to say, stories have to be told or they die, and when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. I'm a recent mom, so I have a 3-year-old daughter, and as I was preparing for tonight, I prepared this speech multiple ways, tried to slice and dice, and each time I tried to avoid telling you a particular story. But each time I realized that in order to share with you what it is that I teach young people, I too have to stand in my integrity. So I'm going to tell you actually a story at the beginning of my speech that's actually quite difficult for me to tell and not one that I've told very many people. But it is so present and so real for me right now that in order to share with you why it is that I train young leaders and young performers in the way that I do, I want to begin with a story. But it occurs to me that it is also fun to have some levity in one's life. So here's a children's book that some of you may know. It's called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And it's a dad taking a couple kids on a trip. And at some point, the book reads, uh-oh, a forest, a big dark forest. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. It continues, uh-oh, a snowstorm, a swirling, whirling snowstorm. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. And so the story I'm about to share with you is because I tried to go over this speech, and I tried to go under this speech, but I've got to go through this speech. So 26 days ago, I went in for an ultrasound and to listen to the heartbeat of my baby. And there was no heartbeat. And this was on a night that my husband and I were hosting the Hotchkiss School faculty and staff, 500 strong, for the end of the year party. And so I went from my OBGYN's office directly to the hospital and had a DNC about 6 hours later. As you can see, it's still raw. It was only 26 days ago. And of course, when I accepted to take this opportunity to offer this speech, I didn't know that 26 days prior that would have happened. So I share this with you tonight because as I prepared, I realized that I am standing so firmly in grief and in loss, but I'm also aware that the experience that I had at Sharon Hospital in Sharon, Connecticut, I was passed from one angel to another among that nursing staff. And it also occurred to me that I've only really had 2 major operations in my life. One happened when I was a junior in high school, long before I became a woman of faith. And the other one was 26 days ago. And so when I was admitted to the hospital, there was no way I was going to move forward without prayer. And I turned to one of the nurses and I said, "Is there a chaplain on staff?" And she said, "No, but we could call somebody." And then I realized that it was going to take a while to make all that happen. And I just turned to my husband and I said, "It's you and me." And so we prayed. And it seemed like ever since that moment when I asked for a chaplain, the women, but it was all women nursing staff, it was like I was just passed, as I said, from angel to angel. And I happened to have been there to be admitted during the shift in staff. And so I think there were about 10 or 11 women who attended to me. And I prayed fiercely before going into the operating room, something I've never done before. I held the hand of the operating nurse, the anesthesiologist, and my husband. And I will add that the other reason I wanted to share this story is because it happens to be an intersection of grief, loss, performance, and leadership, things that are close to my heart. So when my husband and I looked at our watches, we said, "Okay, we have a few hours before you have to go and host this party of 500 people." And so he did. He went and put on, this is going to be, if anybody at Hotchkiss actually listens to this speech, this will be news to a lot of people in that community that that's what was happening. But he went and found a way to stand also in his capacity as a leader, knowing where I was. And I said to him, "Look, if you can come back just before the operation, that would be great." And so the anesthesiologist was fabulous. My husband was 2 minutes late, and they waited. And my husband was with me after, and then I looked at him sort of semi-drugged up, and I said, "Is the party still going on?" And he said, "It is." And I said, "I'll be okay. You go back, take care of the community, and we'll get through this when we get through this." So the other reason I wanted to honor Amani tonight is because there's nothing, I recommend that we all have fabulous chaplain friends in our lives because we all need them. Life hands us lemons and we make lemonade. And so I called Amani and she literally prayed me so fiercely into that operating room that the operating room nurse at the end of the surgery said, it was quite surprising. All your medical stats, or whatever it's called, were all quite calm. And so I just wanted to share that story. It's alive for me. I feel like it forced me to realize a lot about myself and about life and about loss and about grief and about leadership and about performance. And I want to talk about all of those things here tonight. It was Kimberly Patton at Harvard that has really helped me over the years and helped a lot of people over the years, particularly with her talk that she delivered at Harvard, deal with and recognize the value, actually, of brokenhearted times in our lives. And so I just want to share with you her words briefly because they're important to me. And she writes, "It is highly likely that during such brokenhearted, disorienting times, illusions will shatter, old ideas and attachments will be burned up, old ways of being will dissolve, and the one thing or person or way of life we thought we could not live without will be taken from us. These are times when we will learn compassion, what in Buddhism is called bodhicitta, the awakened heart, times when the unbearably wounded will themselves emerge as healers." So before I share some of what I want to share with you tonight, I want to offer a prayer that is offered by Roger Payne, the minister of my home church, the First Parish Church in Lincoln. And before each of his sermons, he says, "May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts find their place this day in the heart of God." Leadership. I've been thinking about leadership since I was quite young. I had the incredible opportunity to serve as captain of a number of athletic teams. And even after I graduated from Bowdoin, I was asked to put together a leadership program. I was young. What did I know? I knew some things. I know a lot more now. And so today, about 11 or so years after graduating from Harvard Divinity School, I've given this topic of leadership and our youth a lot of thought. 3 years ago, I was asked to put together a program on leadership for high school students. And so I thought to myself, in my career and in my experiences, what's mattered? And in addition, I thought, who are the leaders that I honor and are moving to me? And as a result, I put together a program that integrates 3 core areas: mindfulness, nonviolent communication, empathic listening, and sort of also known as narrative storytelling, or another way of thinking about it is through narrative storytelling. And those 3 core skills, it's now a program called Core Leadership, those 3 core skills are important to me in leadership because the leaders that I know I want to be led with, number one, I want to know I can trust them. I want to know that they can trust themselves. So when I've worked with elite athletes, 4-time Olympians, 3-time Olympians, people at the top of their field, I know that even those at the top of their field sometimes don't trust themselves. And if you don't trust yourself, it's really hard to be a teammate. And it's really hard to perform at the level that you want to perform because your teammates actually know that you don't trust yourself. As best we try to hide our grief or our insecurities, everybody else can see them usually. So best to, like I tried to do tonight, stand in our integrity, share who we are, and be authentic. Leaders also need to be able to pay attention with a very, very keen focus and awareness of what's going on. And those two skills fall under what I would call mindfulness. So mindfulness really trains us how to pay attention non-judgmentally, moment by moment. Second of all, mindfulness trains us to be aware of self and other and the context in which we're functioning. And so in my experience, in order for a leader to be able to figure out how to navigate his or her way, they need great data. And you can only get great data if you can pay attention. And of course, we know General Stanley McChrystal is somebody I've gotten to know at Yale. We know that how you move in the military and what you choose to do, but it's true for all of our civilian lives too. What we choose to do and how we choose to move matters on the quality of the data that we get. So if our data is informed by clouded thinking, judgmental mind that gets in the way of seeing clearly who's in front of us or what's in front of us, it's very difficult to lead forward. So mindfulness for me is the beginning of clarifying mind in order to chart the course. Second is nonviolent communication, which is a system of communication that was developed by psychologist Marshall Rosenberg. For those of you who may not be familiar with this, there's a wonderful website and you can Google more about it. But in essence, it is a wonderful interpersonal approach to being able to engage with the other and to make requests that come from an authentic, grounded place. And it minimizes reactivity and engagement. So we also know that mindfulness helps train all of us to function from a place of responsiveness rather than reactivity, so that when we're under pressure, we're making, hopefully, values-driven choices rather than fear-based choices. The other thing that I felt was very important is that as leaders, we need to be able to tell the story, our story, and the story of our organization clearly and inspirationally. And we need to do it concisely. And so there's something called council, which is a tradition of sitting in a circle that is ancient and is also, in a funny way, modern. And extraordinarily democratic. And to help young people, or anybody, truth be told, but I work with young people at present, to help young people learn how to facilitate circle and also how to sit in circle, where there is no one absolute clear leader, where leadership is shared, it's collaborative, it's transparent, it's authentic. And to be able to tell your story in a clear and concise way, but also when it's not your turn to share, to be able to listen to others in such a way that if you know your turn's coming, you refrain from rehearsing what you're saying and you find a way to truly listen and to trust that when it's your turn to come, that whatever is yours to share will be there for you to share. I think most of our organizations today would find a tremendous performance advantage in actually being able to listen to one another before we try to compete with one another, even within our own organizations. And this was something that I was training Olympians to do on the U.S. women's ice hockey team. I was just with Jenny Potter, a four-time Olympian. She came to the Hotchkiss School and met with my core leadership students. And she was affirming the fact that how we relate to one another off ice as a hockey team actually affects performance on ice. Not because, as she said, not because I'm going to hold a grudge against, the grudge that I have with you off ice. I'm not going to keep myself from passing you the puck on the ice. She said, I'm too competitive. If you're open, I'm passing you the puck no matter how I feel about you. But she did say the truth is that the synergies that happen on a true team are enhanced when there is collaboration and there is relationship and there is honesty and integrity, and you're more willing to throw yourself in front of a puck if you feel like, you know, this team is a team and a group of women that I really want to sacrifice myself for. So with all of those things in mind, I started to design what's called now the Core Leadership Program. And this is what we teach at Hotchkiss over a 2-week period in the summers. It's open to 15 to 18-year-olds, and because I've had the privilege of studying at Harvard and working at Yale, this program is now partnered with both of those institutions. They send us students from underrepresented backgrounds, some of whom are here tonight, which is an extraordinary honor. Thank you for coming. So these students come from all over the country, from some of whom are first generation to go to college, most of whom are, and several from Native American heritage, and some from African American heritage. We have students in from China, anyway, all over the world. And it is an opportunity for the Harvard and Yale students in particular to get extraordinary training in advance of beginning their freshman year in college. And then I have chosen, against some advisors, to welcome students who are not going on. So it's sort of this bridge experience, right, where there are students who are returning to high school, both for their junior and for their senior years, who are then meeting people who are going on to college. But I think in a way, a huge piece of the work that I've also always been interested in is how to help young people learn how to find comfort in discomfort, or find their steady footing in awkward moments, right? We know how dangerous it is. You know, there's usually less riding on things when we're young and we do stupid things in awkward moments. But if you've got a $50 million budget and 500 employees and you do something stupid because you feel awkward, there's a lot riding on that moment. And so one of the things I'm trying to teach young people how to do is how to find a steady mind, steady heart, steady body in difficult, awkward situations. And sometimes, you know, the awkward situation is simply just silence. You know, a lot of us are not comfortable just in silence. And I remember on the U.S. team, there were times when, you know, I'd have the women learn how to sit in silence for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever is not very much, and then we'd extend it to maybe 7 minutes. At one point, we were in the locker room. I think it might have been in Harbin, China, and the women were in the locker room, and there was just sort of a pause. There was just sort of a natural pause in the locker room, and some coaches walked in. And they started, because I wasn't working with the coaching staff, I was just working with the women. So they walked in and they started sort of jabbering to fill the silence. And all the women were in the locker room going, God, they need this, like, learn how to be normal in awkward situations training. So at any rate, I want to also sort of conclude this piece of the speech by saying that at core leadership, what happens? You know, what's the over-under here? And I would say that students report that they leave being better able to respond under pressure rather than react. They can find a way to take a breath before making a choice. And I think they learn what mindful listening actually is, how to be present to the other. They learn how to sustain intimacy with others of their own age, and that's something that young people are hungry for. We all knew how to sustain intimacy when we were born. You know, how did we lose it? And then creating the spaces for us to be able to sit together in that kind of intimacy over a period of time with one another is critical for mental health, for physical health, and I think for performance and leadership health. The relationships they develop cause them to feel highly motivated to engage in the world and to engage with one another. And they leave with a sophistication in intra and interpersonal skills that suits them for whatever communities they choose to participate in going forward. The other thing that is true is that young people experience tremendous. What I'm experiencing is that some of these young people are experiencing shame and having periods where they feel like they don't belong. And so the reason that this program is 2 weeks long and is quite intensive is so that we build community in such a way that we truly meet the fundamental human needs of safety, trust, respect, belonging, and inclusion. And those 5 needs arise for all of us, whether we're at Skadden Arps in a law firm and we've just joined. We need to know that we're going to find safety, trust, respect, and that actually our presence here or wherever we work and live matters, that we belong, and that we're going to be included. And I'm interested in young people being able to go out in the world and just as simple as being able to create a healthy, safe dorm culture where those 5 values are central. And then if they can get practice doing that successfully in dorms, they can take that into the rest of their lives. They can go to college and create that space. They can do it in hospitals. They can do it in law firms. They can do it wherever they end up, in schools, so forth. So because my charge tonight is to talk about Harvard Divinity School, I wanted to start with 2 stories that were relevant to me now. But now I want to take a moment and go back in time, about 16 years ago, I think it was, when I started at Harvard. And I want to tell you a little bit about why I even chose to go to Harvard. And then I'll conclude with talking a little bit more about how the Divinity School experience really has continued to inform what I'm doing in the world. So I graduated from Bowdoin College in whenever it was, gosh, I can't remember, 94, I believe. Getting old. So it was 1994, I graduated from Bowdoin College, and I have a fabulous mother and father, and both of them had always encouraged me to pursue what I was passionate about. I think they both also were insistent that I earn a living as well. So, trying to thread that isn't always easy. But at any point, at any rate, I decided to take a photo class at Bowdoin. And I wasn't sure that was going to pay the bills, but I was really passionate about it. I also took econ and calculus, hoping that somehow would pay the bills. So I took this photo class, and that led to me working on a documentary on 100-year-old businesses in Maine. And I worked on that for about 4 or 5 years. And as I was traveling around the 16 counties in Maine to rural places and very even more rural places than those rural places, I was meeting with families who were 4 and 5 generations in the same business, from toothpicks to broccoli to lobstering and a lot of different industries and different wood industry companies. And not only was I hearing about their business models and some really interesting business stories, but I was also hearing about their personal lives, because so much was bound up in these businesses, and because a lot of them were family businesses. So I, at the end of this experience, said to myself, what do we do with all these stories? I mean, how does one even make sense of what one hears? I mean, I was only 23 or 22 years old. And I thought to myself, all right, well, first of all, I love what I'm doing. So maybe what I'll do is I'll be a documentary filmmaker. And so I need to go to school where I can figure out how to put together what I've been hearing and get some further skills on how to deal with stories and unpacking identity and vocation and work and craftsmanship. And at some point, I'll figure out how to get the film skills that are necessary to do this. But I knew I wanted to be at a really rigorous institution where I could explore deeply some of these more interpersonal stories that I was hearing. And so Harvard seemed like the right place for me. So I find myself at Harvard Divinity School. And at some point, I think it was in the early spring of my first year, Bill Moyers came. And he gave a pre-screening of a film called Facing the Truth. And this was about South Africa. And so he gave the pre-screening, and at the end of the pre-screening, he sort of made this, throwaway comment about how he wanted to make a sister film, but he couldn't get the funding. And I thought to myself, what? He's Bill Moyers. And so I went up to him and I said, what do you mean you can get the funding? You're Bill Moyers. You're at the top of your field. Doesn't everybody who's in the top of their field make enough money to make stuff happen? And he's like, no, actually, documentary filmmaking is quite expensive, and I hope you have a trust fund. And I said, well, I don't. What do I do? He said, well, I can see that you have passion in your belly. That's the other absolute necessity to being a great documentary filmmaker. And he said, so if you don't have a trust fund, then what you need to do is get a parallel career. And what you'll do, probably, is you'll, if you continue to sustain an interest in documentary filmmaking, you'll just make some really interesting films about all the really cool things you do in your life. That's sort of what happened to me. Well, here I was at Harvard Divinity School, and let me just say, as you heard in my bio, I was somebody who, very competitive, very driven, very disciplined, and probably prided myself on the value of certainty. It's good to be certain. It's good to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, what you're going to do, how you train, how you take care of your nutrition, how you take care of your body. I've got it pretty pulled together. So Harvard Divinity School was the place where I discovered uncertainty. And thank God I was at Harvard Divinity School and not at the business school and not at the law school and not at the med school, all places where my family has spent time. But I was at the Divinity School. It was the perfect place to get disoriented. So there I am, not knowing why I'm there or where I'm going or if I should even stay there. Because maybe I should just do what the rest of my family does, which is go into law or medicine or business, which is what everybody thought I was going to do. And in fact, I'll tell you that I showed up at Harvard Divinity School as an atheist. And I'm not an atheist now. So, and Harvard is often a place where you show up as a person of faith and you leave an atheist. So I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? Well, thank goodness for Dudley Rose, because Dudley Rose sat there for a year and listened to me in all my confusion and all my disorientation and taught me what it meant to witness another human being in a way that I had never been witnessed before. And so that experience was, of course, deeply transformational, which completely informs what I'm doing today. But I guess what I decided to do was ask a lot of questions and take a lot of different classes. And I had the opportunity of studying with people like Cheryl Giles and Kimberly Patton and Charlie Hallisey and Do-Wei Ming and Susan Sarad, and just exploring medical anthropology and comparative religious ethics and getting lost in, early American religious history and wondering, where am I going? And as some of you know, I took 5 years to get through a 3-year program, and that's part of the reason, because I thought to myself, all right, there's some fascinating classes here, but I don't know what I'm doing. I better go get some experience in the world and so I worked at the Bridgespan Group, which is the nonprofit consulting arm of Bain & Company. And, all of these things while you're going through it, you don't get asked to give speeches, right? My parents are looking at me like, you did pretty well coming out of Bowdoin. Oh, I should mention that I went to massage school. So I'm like massaging people, which seemed a little like, oh my, at some point somebody's like, you're rubbing people's bodies for a living. And I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing and painful. But it wasn't. The truth is for me, all of these things, including becoming a massage therapist and a healer and a body-centered psychotherapist, all of which just sort of happened because I just kept pursuing both paying the bills and doing the things that I cared about. This is the richness of our lives, right? It is, as Kimberly Patton said, when your heart breaks, these are the moments when everything that matters begins. And I didn't know that at Harvard. I just knew that I was disoriented and lost. And so in a way, what I started to realize is that there's a relationship between structure and spirit. And that is at the heart of everything I'm teaching young people now, is that if you want to keep your spirit alive, you've got to also have healthy structures surrounding you. So I'm interested in that, both in how I take care of my own body, which is one structure, which gives rise to healthy spirit, but I'm also interested, now that my husband's taken over the Hotchkiss School, how do we create healthy structure, a school, an institutional structure, such that the spirits of all who work there, faculty, staff, and the students who come through, are thriving? How do we actually find performance advantage in healthy structures so that we can be in our integrity and authenticity with whatever we choose to do and with whatever community we choose to be a part of and whatever communities, if we are leaders, we choose to lead. And so I would say, in conclusion to this portion of the speech, that it was probably Kimberly Patton and also some of the continuing education training that I actually did while I was at Harvard, particularly in craniosacral work and in trauma resolution, I got very skilled actually as a body-centered psychotherapist in working with trauma as it manifests in the body. So I got very skilled at understanding how the nervous system processes and holds trauma. And I think all of those things helped me to realize that the way, well, I'd say those two things in relationship to my background as an elite athlete helped me to realize that if we're going to continue to sustain performance, to sustain citizenship, and just to sustain being human, we've got to be in a continual process of integration and in a continual process of weaving our narratives back into one another in relationship with others. We've got to be in community. We've got to take seriously our stories. We have to be well trained such that we can hold one another's stories in meaningful ways so that when moments arise, which they always do, when we're scared or when we're fearful or when we're disoriented, we can be there for one another. Because what I've learned, for example, with the U.S. team, there was a woman on the U.S. team whose mom died 1 month before the Olympics. And she said to me, how am I even going to compete? I mean, she knew she was going to compete, but she said, I mean, I've also got this. And so it was just a process of helping her understand that the integrating of the narrative, titrating, as we say, in trauma work, so doing little pieces of work at a time, not overwhelming and re-traumatizing somebody with their narrative, but just slowly reintegrating it is critical to just general health. But it's also, in my experience, an extraordinary performance advantage. In conclusion, I just want to say a few things. Probably the best way to say what I'm passionate about is that I really care about helping others create safe and effective world-class cultures. I don't care whether it's at a school, on a team, in a law firm, in a hospital. World-class cultures matter because that's how we caretake who we are as humans. It's very, very difficult, as all of us know, because most of us have had enough experience to know that if you function in a dysfunctional culture, it's exhausting. It takes a huge toll on the individual. And so I'd say, broadly speaking, that's my primary interest and the primary purpose of my work. I would say that there's absolutely no way I would be able to do what I do today if I hadn't gone to Harvard Divinity School, for all the reasons I've outlined thus far. I'm passionate about helping leaders stand with authentic confidence in what I would call either the void or the unknown. So leaders, by definition, are up front and don't know what's coming at them. And so how to stand in the not knowing with integrity and authenticity and a decision-making ability that people can trust, that's interesting to me. And I believe that the work that I'm doing at the Hotchkiss School in this leadership program is training the next generation of leaders to do exactly that. I'll also say that I recently studied with a man at Harvard Medical School named Daniel Brown, who's an extraordinary psychologist. He is the first person in my life that I've ever met who can speak eruditely about the canon of Western psych as well as he can speak about the canon of Eastern traditions in psychology. And what he taught me is how to tell you what it is that I do, because he offered me an equation that I'd never heard of before, but it is actually the equation at the heart of everything that I'm doing. And he said, listen, the work on flow, and for those of you who are interested in performance, there is some really interesting work in psychology going on around flow and performance. And that is a particular interest of the Western world, peak performance, flow states, et cetera. The emphasis in the Eastern traditions really is on virtue and character strength training. And I do want to share this story with you, which is that he said to me, as a Western trained psychologist, and he specializes in trauma resolution, He said, look, the truth is Western psychology, the purpose ultimately is to mitigate, if not eradicate, negative emotional states, okay? Either to mitigate or to eradicate the negative emotional states. And he said, and the truth is, in Western psychology, we're doing a pretty good job of that. The problem is the eradication and mitigation of negative emotional states does not equal health. And so the Eastern traditions have, for thousands of years, been assuming that humans are born basically mentally well, but because of negative afflictive states that we know exist and Buddhism has outlined, there is a process and a series of practices to shift negative afflictive states into neutral and into positive states so that we can gain mental health and happiness. He said, and even that is still not peak performance. And actually, in the Eastern traditions, there are practices to go from just everyday sort of you and me citizenship level of happiness to peak performance levels of happiness. And that helped me understand why, in my life, my pursuit has not been down the road of a PhD in Western Psych. I have actually found myself standing very squarely, even though I'm a Christian, I have found myself standing very squarely in the Eastern traditions and in their practices. And that has been the place where I have found the most useful practices for people interested in high performance states. So the equation that he gave is he said, look, if you can train young people in flow and in what you would either call virtue or character education, those two things will lead to a values-driven culture and to performance excellence. And that got me very excited because that is, in fact, what I'm most interested in, is how to create values-driven cultures and performance excellence. And so I now know, having studied with him, that the combination of learning how to be in the flow, which is deep mindfulness practice, but also cultivating these virtue states or character development is critical. And so for me to be at a school right now is an incredible privilege. But it is also true that Harvard Divinity School is a place where all of these qualities are cultivated. And as far as I'm concerned, the kinds of leaders I want to be led by know how to practice flow, invite other humans into flow, because we know that flow actually has to do with synergy, and when you have synergies, that's the difference between teams and groups. Groups are individuals working together, teams actually. So in a group, 1 + 1 = 2. In a team, 1 + 1 = 3. You actually get synergies. And when we work together effectively, as individuals in flow states, there's the ability for the group to shift into a team. And that is really why so many of us love sports and why we love performance, because when you can get into a place with others at the highest level of your own being, there's nothing greater. I mean, musicians report extraordinary experiences like this in orchestras and in jazz trios. So to conclude, I will say that it's a privilege to address all of you. There is probably no other community to whom I would prefer to offer an address like this, and by whom I would prefer to be witnessed, than Harvard Divinity School affiliates. So thank you all for coming. And I'll also say that I just realized, I didn't somehow know this, but while I was preparing for this speech, I said to my mom, in addition to people that I know have graduated from the law school and the med school, am I the first in my family to graduate from the Divinity School? And she said, actually, 152 years ago, your great-great-grandfather, Reverend James de Normandy, graduated from the Harvard Divinity School. So I am proud to be continuing a wonderful tradition in my family of theological education and engaged activism and work in the world. And I so appreciate you all coming here this evening. Thank you very much.
So I'd again love to thank our Alumni Council for making this whole evening possible, and Bjorn, again, thank you. And I now invite Sarah Taylor Peck to come up. MDiv 07, she is my awesome vice chairman. She's going to offer a final reflection.
So in closing, we are so grateful for all of you being here as witnesses to this program. And I think on the Alumni Council for us, we call this event Divinity Dialogues, but in reality, Divinity Dialogue springs up anywhere. When people just like all of you begin to talk about what matters, and when we share our stories, when we are vulnerable, when we're truth tellers, and when we share our values, when we cast a vision, when we begin to take action to shape the world. Cornelia, thank you for your courage, for offering your heart, and for breaking open a space for this connection, for allowing all of us to bear witness with you, to share in your journey, and to hear about your ministry. Tonight, this was a beginning and it was a genesis. Cornelia offered the first word, but we would expect all of you to go out empowered, able to stand in your own integrity, and tell your story, to bear witness to one another, so that Divinity Dialogues will continue to emerge. So good night.